Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a movie that was canceled, almost a decade ago now.
Yeah,
One that really seemed like a closed book in cinematic history.
absolutely gone.
Now, picture this massive wave of fan enthusiasm, right? A trending hashtag pushing for its revival.
It's kind of amazing, really.
That's exactly where we find ourselves today, diving deep into the fascinating, complex, and surprisingly hopeful saga of The Amazing Spider-Man 3.
What's truly fascinating here is not just that fan voices, amplified by events like Spider-Man, No Way Home, can genuinely shift industry perceptions, but how this specific movement gains such, well, undeniable traction.
Right.
Historically, when a film gets shelved, especially in a franchise as high profile as Spider-Man, it's usually considered dead and buried. Done.
Yeah, fish.
But the narrative around The Amazing Spider-Man 3, or TASM3 as it's often abbreviated, it's a compelling counterexample to that typical industry trajectory. Our mission today is to explore the complete journey of TASM3, what its original ambitious plans were, why it was ultimately canceled, and crucially, what the current landscape means for its potential future. We'll be pulling insights directly from articles, reports, and industry deep dives, giving you a shortcut to understanding one of the most intriguing what-if scenarios in superhero cinema.
This deep dive is for anyone who loves a good behind-the-scenes story, who's curious about how Hollywood really works, or, who just wants to know if their favorite wall crawler might swing back onto the big screen in a surprising way. Get ready for some genuine aha moments, and maybe a few truly surprising facts. So let's start with the incredible energy that has fueled this entire conversation. We're talking about a powerful, largely unorganized fan movement pushing for The Amazing Spider-Man 3 to actually happen.
Yeah, it kind of exploded.
It really exploded, as you mentioned, after Andrew Garfield's triumphant return as Peter Parker in Spider-Man. No Way Home. You felt that immediate, overwhelming fan response to his reprisal of the role, didn't you?
Oh, completely. It was palpable.
It was more than just nostalgia. It felt like a collective sigh of relief, a moment of profound emotional catharsis
Right.
for a character many felt got a raw deal.
Absolutely. The hashtag #MakeToUSM3 hashtag isn't just some fleeting trend. It has already garnered significant organic popularity, demonstrating a persistent underlying desire within the fan base that honestly predates No Way Home, but was undeniably supercharged by it.
Right, it gave it focus.
Exactly. What's even more noteworthy is the strategic anticipation surrounding it. There are organized events planned for this hashtag, with a very real potential to not only gain much more traction, but maybe even to break Twitter records.
Wow.
This isn't just about fans wanting a movie. It's a testament to the evolving nature of fan power in the digital age. It highlights how a character's triumphant return, especially one that offered such profound emotional closure for many viewers, can completely reinvigorate an entire fan base and, in turn, redefine what's considered possible in Hollywood. The fans aren't just passively reacting, they're actively campaigning, using social media as a powerful, unified tool to express their collective will and to signal to studios that a demand exists that, well, cannot be ignored.
It's like a new form of market research.
Driven by passion, exactly. It's pretty fascinating.
It truly is fascinating how that one appearance in No Way Home didn't just satisfy a nostalgic craving, but genuinely reignited hope for an entirely new chapter. Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker was instantly re-embraced, not just as a fun cameo, but as a beloved character with an unfinished story.
Definitely.
You could really feel that resurgence of affection, that collective demand for more. It transformed a what if into a why not for a lot of people. This incredible fan energy is undeniable, but it stems directly from Andrew Garfield himself and his memorable return. So what does he have to say about all of this? Does he feel the same way about picking up the web shooters again?
That's the crucial pivot point, isn't it? Andrew Garfield's publicly expressed openness to returning for TASM3 is perhaps the most significant factor fueling this fan movement because, well, without his willingness, it's a non-starter.
Absolutely. It all hinges on him.
Reports from his time filming No Way Home indicate he was genuinely very happy to be back as Spider-Man, and crucially, he views his character, Peter Parker, as having felt healed and reinvigorated by the events of that film. Think about it. His Peter, the one who lost Gwen and became hardened by it, he found a form of peace and renewal by helping the other Peters and, in turn, himself.
Yeah, that was powerful.
He returned to his world knowing he now has brothers, referencing, Tobey Maguire and Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and is re-inspired to follow his destiny. Plus, he believes his Peter had his eyes open to the mysteries of the multiverse.
So it's not just about coming back for another movie.
Exactly. This isn't just about a paycheck or a franchise extension for him. It seems to be about the character's profound emotional and narrative journey. It suggests a Spider-Man who has grown immensely from his past traumas and is ready for a new, maybe more mature chapter.
That emotional and narrative closure from No Way Home is absolutely crucial, isn't it? It gave his Peter Parker a chance to confront his grief and find a new purpose.
Completely.
It sets the stage for a different kind of Spider-Man, one who isn't just weighed down by the past, but is ready for new adventures. And he's been quite explicit about his conditions, which I find really interesting because it speaks volumes about his past experiences.
Yeah, he laid them out pretty clearly.
He's open to returning if it's right, and it would need to be very unique, very special, and of service to the audience, of service to the character. It's a high bar, which makes sense given the potential for disappointment.
Definitely sets expectations.
But what really stands out are his specific conditions about creative control. He's reportedly looking for no meddling with the script and an assurance that the script will be good. That implicitly references past issues, suggesting a strong desire to avoid the kind of creative compromises that may have plagued his previous experiences with the franchise. He's not just signing up for a role, he's signing up for a story.
Exactly. His insistence on creative integrity is a direct echo of past frustrations, as we'll get into shortly. It's a strong signal that if he were to step back into the suit, it would be for the artistic merit and character development, not merely as a contractual obligation.
Right.
It demonstrates a deep respect for the character and for the audience who has followed his journey. Beyond his public statements, there are circulating rumors, unconfirmed, but rumors that Andrew is back for a handful of films across the broader cinematic landscape.
Interesting.
While specific information on whether TASM-3 is definitively one of them isn't provided, the general buzz suggests a potential for more appearances. Furthermore, there are reports that both Tobey Maguire's and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man were planned to be alive for the massive Secret Wars event in the MCU.
Okay, wow.
Which suggests a long-term strategic vision for these characters within Sony and Marvel's shared space, transcending their individual franchises.
So it's bigger than just one movie.
Potentially, yeah. This broader MCU context further legitimizes the idea of Garfield's return not as an isolated event, but as part of a larger, evolving multiversal narrative that could see these beloved versions of Peter Parker continue to play a role on the big screen for years to come.
Andrew's clear conditions and a renewed character arc are incredibly compelling, and they absolutely resonate with the fans because it shows he cares as much as they do. But to truly understand the path forward for TASM-3, we need to rewind a bit and understand why The Amazing Spider-Man 3 was canceled in the first place. What went wrong behind the scenes that led to its original demise? It can't just be one thing, can it?
You're absolutely right. It wasn't just one factor. It was a perfect storm, really. Understanding the original cancellation is vital to appreciating the current resurgence because it highlights just how many obstacles had to be overcome. The Amazing Spider-Man 3 was initially slated for a 2016 release, and its abrupt cancellation was the result of multiple contributing factors, all converging at the wrong time. This led to Sony's pivotal decision to scrap their ambitious plans and instead team up with Marvel Studios for a full reboot of the character within the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Which changed everything.
A move that fundamentally reshaped Spider-Man's cinematic future.
And the most immediate glaring factor was the reception of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, right?
Yep.
I remember the buzz around that film, and it wasn't exactly positive.
No, it was.
It felt like a turning point, and not in a good way.
Yeah.
Critics didn't pull any punches, did they?
They certainly did not. The film was, to put it mildly, savaged by critics. This wasn't just a few minor setbacks. The critical response was overwhelmingly harsh.
Yeah, I remember that.
Critics pointed to a convoluted plot and overabundance of villains crammed into one narrative,
Too much going on.
and a perceived struggle to balance emotional depth with what felt like studio-mandated universe-building teases. This wasn't just bad reviews. It was a widespread consensus that the film had lost its creative focus. Beyond critical reception, the box office performance was also a major concern for the studio. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 earned significantly less than its predecessor at the box office, bringing in around $709 million globally compared to the first film's $757 million.
Which sounds like a lot, but...
But the downward trend for a major tentpole franchise, especially one with escalating production and marketing costs, sent immediate and undeniable alarm bells ringing at Sony.
Yeah, that's a red flag for studios?
For studios, critical drubbing combined with declining revenue are immediate indicators that the creative direction might be off, and cast significant doubt on the viability of planned sequels and the very foundation of an ambitious cinematic universe they were trying to build.
So it wasn't just critics, but the money, too. That's always
Yeah.
a massive driver in Hollywood, sometimes the driver. And Sony, before that, had these grand, almost untamed ambitions for their own universe, didn't they?
Oh,
They
yeah.
were really trying to compete head-on with Marvel on their own turf, which in hindsight feels like a risky move given Marvel's head start.
They absolutely were, and this is where the story gets fascinating from a corporate strategy perspective. Before The Amazing Spider-Man 2's failure, Sony had ambitious plans for their own massive Spider-Man cinematic universe.
Right.
They held the valuable rights to a rich cast of Spider-Man characters and villains, a treasure trove of intellectual property that they clearly wanted to exploit to rival Marvel Studios' burgeoning success with the Avengers. They envisioned a vast, interconnected world, much like what Marvel was building with careful, long-term planning.
But they couldn't quite pull it off.
Well, what became a crucial realization within Sony was that they had no idea what they were doing when it came to executing this grand vision on a creative level. They owned the pieces, but lacked the blueprint and the central architect. This highlights a significant challenge in Hollywood. Simply owning valuable intellectual property isn't enough. You need a clear, cohesive creative vision, consistent leadership, and the strategic acumen to execute it over many years.
Yeah.
Their internal struggles, which included frequent executive changes and a lack of a unified creative plan, ultimately led them to seek help from Marvel Studios, a telling admission of their predicament and a recognition of Marvel's proven expertise.
And speaking of Marvel Studios, that's where Kevin Feige comes into the picture. He's known for his foresight, and it sounds like he saw this train wreck coming from a mile away, long before anyone else wanted to admit it.
Pretty much, yeah.
How did his influence ultimately play into the cancellation?
His influence was pivotal, truly. After The Amazing Spider-Man 2's poor performance in what must have been a desperate plea for guidance, Sony executive Amy Pascal invited Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios to discuss ideas for TASM3. What's truly telling, however, is the history between them. Feige had actually previously sent an email to Sony during the pre-production of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, advising them to cut out all of this and not do any of this because it's terrible and your movie is going to bomb.
Wow, blunt.
Very blunt. Sony, of course, disregarded this blunt but prophetic warning, which understandably caused significant friction and demonstrated a clear difference in strategic and creative philosophy between the two studios.
So there was already tension there.
Definitely. When Feige was finally brought in, the discussions weren't about salvaging TASM3 as it was. He pushed for a reboot of the character entirely rather than integrating Garfield's Spider-Man into the MCU. He essentially argued that the existing creative path was unsustainable.
Right.
This fundamentally changed the character's cinematic trajectory, leading to the casting of Tom Holland and a completely fresh start for Spider-Man within the MCU. It was an intervention that redefined the future of one of cinema's most iconic superheroes.
That's a huge moment. Feige basically saying, my way or the highway. But proving he was right. But there was also friction with Andrew Garfield himself, right? It wasn't just about the box office or creative vision. Personal dynamics played a surprisingly significant part in all of this.
Indeed, the relationship between Andrew Garfield and Sony leadership became another critical, albeit human, factor in the franchise's downfall. A particularly damaging incident involved Garfield's failure to attend a planned press event in Rio, where a major TASM3 announcement was expected.
Oh, I remember hearing something about that.
This seemingly minor oversight offended top Sony executives, including then Sony CEO Kaz Hirai, who reportedly felt personally slighted.
Yeah, that wouldn't go down well.
In the high-stakes world of studio tentpoles, perceived slights, especially from a lead actor who is the face of a multi-million-dollar franchise, can have profound impacts on relationships. Adding to this tension, Garfield also publicly blamed the studio for meddling with and ruining what he believed was a solid script for The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Okay, so he spoke out.
He did. He famously stated his heart was broken a little bit when the story was compromised, hinting at significant creative clashes behind the scenes. This public critique, however justified from Garfield's artistic perspective, further rubbed the studio the wrong way.
Yeah, studios don't usually like that.
Not usually, no. It highlights the often fraught human element in major studio decisions where creative integrity clashes with corporate control and where personal conduct can derail even the most ambitious plans.
So we have critical and commercial failure, Sony's internal struggles, Feige's intervention, and personal friction with the star. That's a lot. But there was also Feige's creative assessment of Garfield's Spider-Man specifically, which seems to have been the final nail in the coffin for this particular iteration of the character. What was his specific critique?
Yes, that's the final and perhaps most decisive nail in TASM3's original coffin from a creative standpoint. Kevin Feige reportedly criticized Garfield's performance after viewing a rough cut of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, finding it too emotional and all over the place.
Too emotional.
Yeah. This was a significant comment, indicating a departure from the more grounded, relatable Peter Parker Feige envisioned. He also expressed a strong dislike for the storyline involving Peter's father, feeling it undermined the idea of Peter being a normal kid from Queens.
Right, the whole mystery box thing.
Exactly. For Feige, the core of Spider-Man's enduring appeal in the Marvel Cinematic Universe was his relatability as an everyday teenager struggling with extraordinary powers. A complex, emotional Peter with a mysterious, grander family legacy and a shadowy corporate conspiracy at its heart diverged significantly from that foundational concept. This creative critique directly contributed to Feige championing a full reboot with a younger actor to put Peter back in high school, focusing on his journey as a relatable, modern kid. It signaled a clear creative divergence and a fundamental disagreement on the character's essence, ultimately paving the way for Tom Holland's version of Spider-Man to join the MCU, resetting the character's cinematic path entirely.
So with such a perfect storm of factors leading to its cancellation, it begs the question, what elaborate plans did Sony and the filmmakers have for this universe before it all fell apart? What were we missing out on when all those dominoes fell?
This is where we delve into the truly fascinating what-if scenarios, the extensive, often radical, and sometimes, frankly, bizarre original plans for TASM3 and Sony's broader, massive Spider-Man cinematic universe.
Okay, I'm ready for this.
It reveals just how much was on the table and how wildly ambitious their vision was before the whole thing crumbled.
And the Sinister Six film was really the keystone, wasn't it? It was supposed to precede TASM3, which is a pretty bold move to put villains front and center before your main hero's next film.
Very bold.
That's a unique way to kick off a universe.
Exactly. The Amazing Spider-Man 3 was actually planned to follow the Sinister Six film, which would have been the next entry in Sony's cinematic universe, essentially launching their shared world with a villain-centric narrative, a very bold statement of intent. The Sinister Six film itself would have been led by Norman Osborn, whose frozen head was to be revived in a post-credit scene.
Wait, what? His frozen head?
Yeah. A truly bizarre and ambitious concept right out of the gate, setting a very distinct, almost macabre tone.
Okay, that's something.
Drew Goddard was hired to write and direct The Sinister Six, and he envisioned it as a giant, epic Spider-Man movie where, interestingly, audiences would root for the villains.
Like a heist movie.
Sort of, yeah. He drew inspiration from films like The Dirty Dozen and Reservoir Dogs, which tells you a lot about the anti-heroic tone he was aiming for. Goddard wanted it to be a standalone story, not heavily reliant on every single continuity thread, making it somewhat unique for a shared universe plan.
Okay.
It was even conceived as a two-parter, which speaks to its intended scale, and was set to feature incredibly ambitious elements like the Savage Land dinosaurs and time travel portals.
Whoa, dinosaurs, time travel.
Yeah.
In a Sinister Six movie.
Yep, just picture that. He was most excited about Sandman, with Tom Hardy being his top choice to play him.
Interesting choice, pre-Venom.
Right. Depicting him as an anarchic enthusiast who would end the film storming London like Godzilla.
Wow. Okay, that's ambitious.
The end of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 had already set the stage, visually teasing the Sinister Six with gear for iconic villains like Vulture, Dr. Octopus, Mysterio, Electro, Sandman, and Kraven the Hunter. It was a truly expansive and perhaps unwieldy vision for an interconnected world.
That's wild. Dinosaurs and time travel in a Spider-Man villain movie. It sounds like they were swinging for the fences, maybe even over them. And then back to Peter, Gwen Stacy's death was obviously a huge traumatic event in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. What were the plans for its immediate and lasting aftermath in TASM3? How would that shape Peter?
Gwen's death was indeed a pivotal and bold choice in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, as it defied expectations for the character.
Yeah, it hit hard.
In TSM3, the film would have opened with Peter still mourning Gwen's death, focusing heavily on his struggle to recover from that immense loss. This decision to kill her off could have led to a much darker, more emotional Peter Parker, potentially even pushing him towards becoming an anti-hero or a hero who no longer pulls his punches.
Which we kind of saw hinted at in No Way Home.
Exactly. A significant departure for the character's traditional portrayal. We got that brief but powerful glimpse of Peter's profound grief and anger over this in No Way Home, where he admitted to becoming rageful.
Right.
TSM3 would have delved much deeper, exploring how her death would and still could impact TSM3 in a long-term foundational way for his character arc, exploring the psychological scars and how he might have coped or failed to cope with such a profound trauma in his solo journey.
And the symbiote was also on the cards, which is a massive fan-favorite storyline. How were they planning to introduce Venom into this universe, and how would that tie into Peter's emotional state after Gwen?
Mark Webb, the director, was eager to include Venom in his third Spider-Man film, recognizing the character's immense popularity and narrative potential.
Makes sense.
The concept was that the symbiote would initially attach to Spider-Man himself, but with a twist. It would specifically amplify his anger and guilt over Gwen's death, connecting it directly to the emotional core of TASM3.
Oh, that's clever, tying to the grief.
Yeah. Imagine Peter's already raw grief and rage, now supercharged by an alien entity, pushing him to dark places. The film would then culminate with Peter separating from the symbiote, which would subsequently bond with Eddie Brock, setting up a standalone Venom film where he'd battle Carnage.
So a whole plan laid out.
A clear, well-thought-out pathway to establishing a Venom franchise directly from the Spider-Man narrative. Interestingly, there were also discussions about an alternative, making Flash Thompson Venom, inspired by the Agent Venom storyline.
Agent Venom. Okay.
Showcasing the range of ideas considered for how to bring this iconic villain and anti-hero to the screen, and demonstrating how flexible they were with the source material to fit their cinematic vision.
Wow, so the symbiote would tie right into Peter's grief. That's a clever way to integrate it thematically, making it more than just a cool suit. But then we get to some really radical ideas like bringing characters back from the dead. That sounds pretty bizarre for a superhero film outside of comic book logic.
It absolutely does, and this is where the plans veered into truly unconventional territory, demonstrating Sony's willingness to shake things up. One bizarre plot point discussed involved Peter getting a serum that could bring people back from the dead.
A resurrection serum. Okay.
This was envisioned as a way to bring back not just Captain Stacy, which might have made some sense from a mentorship perspective, but even Gwen Stacy herself, which would have dramatically altered the consequences of The Amazing Spider-Man 2's tragic ending.
Undoing Gwen's death. Wow.
The symbiote, believe it or not, was also explored as a potential device to enable Gwen's return, further intertwining these major plot threads in a very unconventional way.
So multiple ways to bring her back were considered.
Apparently so. And perhaps the most radical idea discussed was turning Gwen into Carnage.
Gwen into Carnage.
Yeah, forcing Peter to kill her again, but allowing him to say goodbye and gain some form of closure in this horrific scenario.
That is incredibly dark.
And twisted. These concepts highlight the creative extremes the writers and filmmakers were willing to explore, pushing the boundaries of what a Spider-Man story could be, even if they risked alienating some fans with such drastic reversals of iconic, impactful moments. It shows a desperate, almost anything-goes mentality to keep the audience invested.
Turning Gwen into Carnage. That really takes the cake in terms of wild ideas, forcing Peter into another impossible choice. It's grim, but certainly provocative. And what about Mary Jane Watson? She was cast in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but her scenes were cut. How is she meant to finally enter Peter's life in TSM3, and would her introduction be different from other Spider-Man films?
You're right. Scenes introducing Mary Jane, played by Shailene Woodley, were indeed cut from The Amazing Spider-Man 2 because her introduction was considered difficult to integrate seamlessly with Peter and Gwen's intense, emotionally charged storyline at the time.
Yes, that made sense.
However, in the plans for TASM3, Peter was rumored to meet MJ in a much more grounded and emotionally complex way, in group counseling, where they would bond over shared trauma.
Group counseling. Interesting. Different.
Yeah. Their relationship would develop as Peter struggled to open up after Gwen's death, navigating his grief and the complexities of his dual life. The initial idea was that if Peter managed to bring Gwen back, it would naturally halt his progress with MJ. But after gaining closure with Gwen, he would then realistically ask MJ out.
Okay, so a more mature take on their meeting.
This offers a more nuanced, emotionally complex introduction than the typical superhero love interest trope, grounding their connection in shared vulnerability and healing, and making their bond feel earned rather than simply fated. It presented a mature arc for Peter navigating new relationships after profound loss.
That's a much more organic and human way to introduce MJ than just a new love interest for the sake of it. It shows a real effort to mature the storytelling and reflect Peter's journey. And Peter's father, Richard Parker, was another contentious storyline that raised some eyebrows in the Amazing Spider-Man films. Were they planning to bring him back and continue that thread too?
Indeed. A notable cutscene from The Amazing Spider-Man 2 featured Peter's father, Richard Parker, returning to explain that he had disappeared to protect Peter from Oscorp and its dangerous secrets.
Right, the mystery dad.
If brought back in TASM3, the film would have delved into the complex repercussions of his return and explored his deeper connections to Oscorp and his ongoing feud with Norman Osborn. This would have added a layer of espionage and family mystery to Peter's life, moving beyond just his identity as Spider-Man. There was even a fan-scripted version of TASM3 that involved Richard Parker returning after Gwen's death, specifically to warn Peter about Oscorp's plans to weaponize an alien entity, possibly even hinting at the symbiote's origins or another multiversal threat.
Okay, connecting the dots.
In this version, he also helps Peter expose Oscorp's illegal activities, leading to Peter's exoneration from public scrutiny or potential legal issues. It would have added another layer of corporate intrigue and parental guidance to Peter's already complicated life.
So many threads. It sounds like they were building a massive, intricate web, not just a single story. What about other spin-offs and side characters? I heard there were some pretty outlandish ideas floating around beyond the core films.
Oh, absolutely. The universe was set to expand rapidly, reflecting the studio's desire to maximize its Spider-Man IP. Felicity Jones's role as Felicia Hardy, or Black Cat, was intended to be significantly expanded not just as a supporting character, but to set up her own standalone Black Cat film,
A Black Cat movie, okay.
where she would reportedly get her luck powers from Kingpin, connecting her to another corner of the Spider-Man lore and setting up a potential new corner of Sony's universe.
Kingpin involved too. Interesting.
Beyond that, plans included the Venom and Carnage film we discussed, and yes, you heard correctly, an Aunt May spy spinoff.
Get out, Aunt May.
Jonesy.
Spy. Seriously.
Seriously, this was a concept considered ridiculous, even by Sally Field herself, who played Aunt May in the TASM films, which really tells you something about how far they were reaching for new ideas, even if they were off the wall.
Wow. Okay, that's truly bizarre.
Andrew Garfield was also reportedly eager to pass the torch to Miles Morales in the future, suggesting a succession plan for the Spider-Man mantle within this universe, looking ahead to a new generation of web-slingers.
Okay, Miles Morales makes more sense. But Aunt May, wow, that officially takes the cake. That's a truly bizarre idea for a character known for her wisdom in baking, not espionage. But then, beyond these individual film concepts, Sony had an even larger 5-year megaplan, didn't they? It truly shows the sheer scale of their ambition to create a sprawling cinematic empire.
It does, and this truly encapsulates the grand, almost overwhelming scope of their vision. One Sony executive proposed an incredibly ambitious 5-film plan that would have commenced with a prequel to The Amazing Spider-Man 2 featuring Kraven the Hunter.
A prequel after the sequel.
Yeah, and this prequel was even intended to retroactively rectify Gwen and Norman Osborn's deaths, which speaks to their willingness to perhaps retcon elements or explore alternative timelines to set things right.
Wow. Okay, so fixing things.
This would then be followed by Drew Goddard's Sinister Six film. From there, the plan branched out to include a Spider-Man 2099 spin-off, delving into the origin story of Miguel O'Hara.
Spider-Man 2099.
Cool. A Venom film and a Black Cat film. This entire sequence was designed to culminate in an Avengers-type film, where Spidey, Black Cat, Venom, and Spidey 2099 would team up to fight Carnage.
A huge team-up finale.
This truly illustrates the vast, albeit ultimately unrealized scope of Sony's ambitions for their Spider-Man IP, showcasing how studios once dreamed of competing directly with Marvel's shared universe model, not just by having one hero, but by building an entire interconnected saga across multiple characters and even different timelines. It was a massive, if ultimately unfeasible, vision.
These plans were incredibly detailed and, frankly, quite wild. They really highlight how much creative energy and corporate ambition was poured into this universe, even if it eventually collapsed. But with the current reality of the multiverse, which we saw fully embraced in No Way Home, what new possibilities emerge for a modern TASM-3. How could it look different today, building on the lessons of the past?
The concept of the multiverse, fully embraced and undeniably successful after No Way Home, truly opens up practically endless possibilities for a potential TASM-3 now.
Right. It changes the game.
It acts as a powerful narrative device, allowing for a fresh take on old ideas, revisiting characters, and forging entirely new connections that wouldn't have been feasible in a single linear continuity. It's like the cinematic universe just got a complete narrative reset button, giving creators incredible freedom.
It's like a narrative reset button, as you say. And for Andrew Garfield's Peter, the biggest lingering trauma is Gwen Stacy's death. Could a modern TSM-3 finally provide some kind of closure around that? Perhaps even a reunion in some form? That's what many fans are hoping for.
Precisely. A new story could definitively fix past mistakes, like Gwen's death, or at least offer a profound form of resolution, without resorting to time travel or resurrection serums within Peter's own universe, which could feel like cheapening the original tragedy.
Yeah, you don't want to undo that impact.
The multiverse allows for the introduction of a Gwen Stacy from another reality, perhaps even a live-action Spider-Gwen.
Spider-Gwen. That would be amazing.
This would provide a compelling, emotionally resonant way for Emma Stone to potentially reappear and allow Peter a form of closure, or at least a way to confront his grief and healing process in a new dimension. It elegantly sidesteps the traditional problem of a deceased character by introducing a variant, exploring new dimensions of his character's healing process and understanding of his own trauma.
So, not bringing his Gwen back, but meeting another.
Exactly. It wouldn't necessarily erase his pain, but it could offer a path to acceptance, or even a new kind of connection to the memory of his Gwen, acknowledging her sacrifice while allowing him to move forward.
And the most tantalizing possibility for many fans has to be the symbiote and a crossover with Tom Hardy's Venom. No Way Home pretty much set that up on a silver platter, didn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It feels almost tailor-made for Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man.
It couldn't have set it up more perfectly, and the audience practically roared when it happened. Andrew Garfield is reportedly excited about the notion of facing off with Tom Hardy's anti-hero Venom.
I bet he is.
And you really don't have to strain to imagine it. The post-credit scene of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
No Way Home explicitly showed Tom Hardy's Venom sent back to the Sony universe, but crucially, he left behind a piece of the symbiote.
Right, that little bit.
Simultaneously, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man made a throwaway but very pointed comment about wanting to fight an alien during their multiversal team-up with the other Peters.
Yeah, I caught that.
This isn't just fan speculation. It's a direct, in-universe setup that capitalizes on recent cinematic events and offers a compelling narrative hook. It provides a natural, pre-established pathway for PSM3 to integrate with Sony's ongoing live-action Venom franchise, giving fans a long-awaited confrontation between Garfield's Peter and a truly formidable, yet morally ambiguous foe.
Peter's intensity versus Venom's.
Yeah. Imagine Peter's emotional intensity clashing with Venom's brutal power. It promises a very unique dynamic.
That would be huge. It feels almost preordained now. A perfect way to bring him back into the larger Spider-Verse without having to fully integrate him into the MCU. What about re-engaging with existing villains from his own universe, or even bringing in entirely new threats to challenge his evolved character?
The multiverse allows for immense flexibility here, enabling TSM3 to cherry-pick elements that work best. Villains like Lizard and Electro, who returned to No Way Home and experienced a form of rehabilitation and understanding from Peter, could potentially reappear in TSM3.
As allies, maybe, or still villains.
Could be either. They could be revisited either as reformed allies, perhaps struggling with their past, or perhaps with lingering antagonistic tendencies, reflecting their nuanced character arcs from No Way Home. Other characters introduced in Garfield's films, such as B.J. Novak's Alistair Smythe or Paul Giamatti's Rhino,
Oh yeah, Rhino.
could also be revisited and featured in expanded roles, providing a sense of continuity for his specific universe. Alternatively, to give TSM3 a completely fresh feel and truly differentiate itself from past installments and even the MCU's Spider-Man, a sequel might feature an all-new supporting cast and an entirely new enemy.
A clean break, almost.
Right. This would reflect Peter's new post-No Way Home perspective, where he's no longer just dealing with the remnants of Oscorp, but a broader, potentially multiversal array of threats, or even more abstract challenges that test his matured heroism.
That makes a lot of sense. Move forward, don't just rehash. And speaking of Peter's new perspective, No Way Home showed us a much darker version of him, didn't it? One who stopped pulling his punches. How would that darker path and his subsequent healing play into a modern TASM-3? It's a fascinating character arc that feels ripe for exploration.
This is a critical point for his character development and offers an incredibly rich starting point for a new story. During No Way Home, it was revealed that Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker became a much darker, angrier character after Gwen's death.
Yeah, the rageful comment.
He admitted to stopping pulling his punches and becoming rageful, indicating a significant departure from the lighter, quip-filled hero we traditionally associate with Spider-Man. The profound shared experiences and the opportunity for redemption he found in No Way Home helped him heal from this grief and anger, meaning his character would be different moving forward.
So changed by the experience.
Exactly. If this version of Peter were to return, he might not be hitting the bad guys quite as hard, and instead try to dig deeper into the multiverse, exploring its mysteries and finding new ways to help, perhaps even trying to prevent similar tragedies in other realities.
A more mature, maybe wiser Spider-Man.
This allows for a more mature, evolved Spider-Man, one who has grappled with immense personal darkness, faced his demons, and found a path towards a more balanced, perhaps even more compassionate, heroism. He would be a wiser, more experienced Spider-Man, offering a different kind of character arc than we've seen before.
That evolution is so compelling. It turns his past trauma into a strength, a pathway to greater wisdom, and a unique approach to heroism. With all these tantalizing creative possibilities, the question shifts from can it happen to is it really a possibility? Let's look at the current industry pulse and the concrete signals coming from studios and fans alike.
The answer is increasingly leaning towards yes. A real possibility after years of hopelessness, largely thanks to a confluence of factors beyond just fan enthusiasm. There are concrete signals from various corners that suggest Sony and Marvel are paying close attention and perhaps even laying groundwork.
Okay, let's get into those signals. Let's start with that undeniable fan appetite we talked about at the top. Are we seeing that translate into more than just trending hashtags, something that truly gets the studio's attention? What's the real-world impact of this fan demand?
Absolutely. The fan appetite isn't just a fleeting social media trend. It's manifesting in tangible, organized ways that Hollywood takes notice of. Fan petitions have emerged, with one totaling over 30,000 signatures on platforms like change.org.
30,000? Wow, that's significant.
It is. This demonstrates an organized and persistent demand that goes beyond simply posting on Twitter. For studios, these petitions are not just numbers, they represent a measurable segment of the audience that is actively seeking this content. This collective voice is a powerful signal to studios, indicating a tangible market and audience readiness that they simply cannot ignore when planning future projects.
It shows there's money to be made, basically.
Basically, yeah. It's a clear economic incentive, showing that the investment would likely be met with significant viewership and revenue. It signals to decision makers that there's a pre-existing, highly engaged, and vocal audience waiting for this film, which reduces risk in a volatile industry.
And beyond fan power, what about the legal and studio feasibility? For years, I remember hearing whispers about complex rights issues and legal barriers. Were there actual legal roadblocks that have now been cleared, making this whole thing possible?
This is a crucial point that often gets overlooked in fan discussions, but it's fundamentally important for any film to get off the ground. A former Marvel lawyer explicitly stated in 2022 that, legally speaking, there was nothing standing in the way of Sony jumping back into the Amazing Spider-Man franchise.
Okay, so legally it's possible.
Exactly. This statement is incredibly significant because it removes a major perceived barrier that has plagued the franchise's potential return. For years, there was widespread speculation about complex legal or contractual entanglements between Sony and Marvel that might prevent Garfield's return outside of specific MCU appearances.
Right, the Sony-Marvel deal complications.
This legal clarity effectively shifts the conversation entirely from can they legally do this to will they creatively and financially commit to this. While Sony hasn't officially commented on TASM3 specifically, this legal green light strongly supports the idea that a third film is now a real possibility after years of hopelessness, purely from a rights and feasibility standpoint, proving the door is indeed open.
That's a huge hurdle removed right there. It simplifies the path forward considerably. And we've seen Sony themselves engaging with the material on social media, which always gets fans talking and speculating. Is that just coincidence, or is it strategic teasing that suggests something more deliberate might be in the works?
It's highly unlikely to be mere coincidence, especially in the calculated world of studio marketing. Sony has been notably active in posting content related to The Amazing Spider-Man on their official social media channels, particularly clips featuring Andrew Garfield.
Yeah, I've seen those posts.
Many fans and industry observers interpret this as a deliberate strategy, hinting at TASM3, drawing direct parallels to how they promoted his films before No Way Home.
Stirring the pot a little.
Exactly. What's even more telling is that this activity intensified after Garfield's Esquire interview, where he publicly expressed his willingness to return under the right conditions. This suggests a deliberate engagement with fan sentiment and a strategic leveraging of the renewed interest.
Keeping the hype alive.
They're testing the waters, keeping the conversation alive, and perhaps subtly building anticipation for something more concrete down the line. It's a way for them to gauge interest without making any firm commitments, while simultaneously feeding the very movement that could make the film happen.
So the studio itself is playing into it, which is a powerful signal. And what about the industry's big players, like Kevin Feige at Marvel and Tom Holland, the current Spider-Man? Their opinions carry a lot of weight. Have their sentiments shifted on this idea, moving from what was once a contentious situation to something more supportive?
They absolutely have, and this is perhaps one of the most compelling signs that TASM3 is more than just a pipe dream. Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios may not be as opposed to TSM3 as they once were, especially given the undeniable success and creative flexibility offered by the multiverse concept introduced in No Way Home.
The multiverse changed things for everyone.
It really did. What was once seen as a rival franchise, potentially undermining their own Spider-Man, can now be viewed as a complementary piece within a larger multiversal tapestry, allowing multiple versions of the character to coexist. And then there's Tom Holland, the current live-action Spider-Man, who explicitly supports the idea.
Tom Holland supports it. That's big.
Yeah. He stated he would love to see The Amazing Spider-Man 3, and crucially, he praises Andrew Garfield for being able to make amends to the character and the studio through his No Way Home appearance.
That's really cool to hear. Shows respect.
Endorsements from key figures within both Marvel and the current Spider-Man franchise landscape are incredibly significant positive indicators, representing a major shift from previous stances. It suggests a collaborative spirit where what's best for the character and the fans might now outweigh past corporate rivalries or creative disagreements.
That's incredible. Tom Holland's support really gives it a stamp of approval from within the Spider-Verse family, signaling a new era of cooperation. Finally, how does this fit into Sony's ongoing efforts to build their own Spider-Man universe with films like Venom and Kraven the Hunter? Could Garfield's return be integrated there, potentially connecting disparate films in a more cohesive way?
This is where it gets incredibly strategic for Sony, potentially leveraging their existing assets in a powerful way. They continue to develop their own distinct Spider-Man cinematic universe with films like Venom, Morbius, and the upcoming Kraven the Hunter.
Right, their own separate universe.
This naturally leads to speculation that Garfield could be brought back to face these villains, integrating him directly into Sony's current live-action universe and potentially connecting disparate films that have struggled to find a clear anchor. Imagine his Spider-Man as an anchor, a known quantity, in this growing roster of characters, providing a central hero for their burgeoning universe.
Giving that universe a proper Spider-Man?
Potentially. Furthermore, Drew Goddard's Sinister Six script, which we discussed earlier and was designed to be standalone, could also potentially fit into such plans, especially since producer Amy Pascal has also recently expressed readiness to make Goddard's film.
So Sinister Six might still happen too.
It's possible. This suggests that rather than a complete reboot, Garfield's return could provide a bridge or a central figure for Sony's ongoing universe, maximizing their existing IP and creating a more cohesive, albeit multiversal, narrative strategy that finally gives their non-MCU Spider-Verse films a clear direction and a beloved hero to rally around.
So we've swung through the astonishing journey of The Amazing Spider-Man 3, from its ambitious original plans through its unexpected cancellation due to, well, a mix of creative clashes, financial underperformance, and corporate friction.
Quite a mix, yeah.
And now to its truly remarkable potential for revival in the age of the multiverse. It's a testament to the enduring power of a beloved character, a truly compelling performance by Andrew Garfield, and the unwavering collective voice of the fans.
We've seen how intricate creative vision, complex corporate decisions, and even personal dynamics played a pivotal part in its past, and how shifting industry tides and immense fan passion are now shaping its future. The narrative of Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man is far from over in the minds of many, and the cinematic doors are more open than ever before for a continuation that could resolve old traumas and introduce exciting new confrontations, offering a more mature and evolved take on the character.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If TASM3 does finally happen, and considering how much Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker has already been through the profound grief of losing Gwen, the anger that almost consumed him, the healing he found in the multiverse, and the wisdom he gained, what's that one specific unresolved emotional beat or character struggle you would most want to see him confront and overcome in this new chapter? What would bring you the most satisfaction from seeing his story continue? Something to mull over as you go about your day.